So hi, my name is Alexandra Zsigmond. I'm an artist, art director, curator, and designer. So I have roots in Greece. My mom's side of the family is Greek, and so I've come to Greece quite often as a child. But I wanted, now that I'm an adult, to have a deeper engagement in Athens and to learn a bit more about the art scene here. So I've always been really interested in seeing how different artists visualize the interior of the body and how we think and how we feel. I was really lucky to commission artwork for a blog on anxiety for a really long time, and to see how all of these different artists would portray this internal feeling. For a long time, for around 7 years, I worked as an art director at the New York Times, commissioning illustration for the Sunday Review section. For the past 2 years, I've been teaching and traveling around Europe and working on my own art practice. So at the moment, I'm in Athens, staying at an art residency space called A-, and I'm working on a project here on Tamata, which are Greek offerings, these metal plaques that are used in churches to give thanks for the healing from different ailments. And so I'm doing research into an alternative language for Tamata and what that might look like. Typically, traditionally, the language that has evolved in these objects is one of arms, legs, eyes. Basically, it's a language of body parts. And that was basically used to ask for help with different ailments. What I find interesting about that is that is a type of language. It's a visual language that is very standardized. So in a way, it almost becomes like a system of typography. But what I'm interested in is an alternative lexicon that can be a language of the interior. So instead of a language in these traditional tamata that is a language of the exterior body, I'm interested in creating tamata that can address the interior ailments that we have, things like anxiety or issues with how we think, or issues with how we feel. And I think that these are more contemporary ailments, and so I'm interested in creating this new lexicon. I've always been interested in a more diagrammatic way of thinking and representing things. I think this comes from something way back in my childhood. I've actually had 2 heart surgeries. I was born with a congenital heart defect, and I've had to have these major surgeries. And I've also gone through my childhood going to the doctor every year and having these diagrammatic printouts of my heart, always seeing the EKG, the MRI, and basically seeing my body on charts and how my body and what happens inside of it is represented in these diagrammatic ways. And so when I really think about it deeply, I think this is where my interest in kind of schematically representing, my emotions or my thoughts, I think this is where it comes from. And so for me, how I always visualize thoughts are maybe similar to these kind of EKG charts, where I visualize thoughts as a series of dots and lines connecting through space. And I visualize both thoughts and emotions as these very simple movement lines through space. So what I've tried to capture on the tamata are kind of the similar visual language that uses those iconographic elements. So one of the inspirations for the project is my godmother, who lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And she has a huge collection of milagros, which is the Mexican version of the tamata in Greece. So I've grown up being surrounded by the milagros and by this idea of the votive offering in general. And so it's something I've always been interested in and always thought was beautiful. And so then that, combined with the fact that I've also had medical issues as a child, I think for me this is what made me interested in exploring tamata from a different angle. One thing I thought was interesting when I was doing my research is that the most prevalent type of tamata is the Itamata. And I think that's really interesting. It just made me think a lot about diseases over time and how most likely in ancient times there was this need for Itamata because there weren't glasses or contact lenses to correct eye difficulties. And that's, I guess, an obvious thought, but it's not something I would have necessarily thought of before. You know, it also might be linked to this idea of the evil eye, or this importance of eye symbolism in Greek culture in general. But it was interesting to learn about that and think more deeply about why eyes are so important symbolically, and why maybe now, when we have all these correctives for vision, now there are other problems that are more important. And so how can the language of Tamata maybe be adapted to fit more with where we are in the current moment? Yeah, so another part of the project was creating this new language for anxiety, my own language. And so I did a series of paintings that have been made into an accordion book, and each image is paired with text. And those are actually my own thoughts, kind of a simple 2-sentence narration of each image and what it means. And I wanted to include text just because I wanted to really make sure that the audience understands what each of these things is meant to visualize, but then I'm trying to give them enough room within the image to interpret it widely as well. So both provide an interpretation, but leave the image abstract enough to invite other interpretations as well. I think that what I'm curious about in the future is how our ideas of what can be read will change, because ultimately text is something that can be read, but so many other things can be read: images, diagrams, trees, bodies. Essentially everything is a sort of language that can be read, whether it's by a mind or a machine. And so I'm just really interested in how, as we go forward into the future, our ideas of how to read will expand, especially as machines more and more are able to not only interpret text, but also read our bodies in more interesting ways. And that, of course, relates to how machines can diagram our bodies and diagram what happens inside our bodies. So, yeah, I guess I'm interested in how text will slowly fuse with both images and diagrams, and we will expand our ideas of what reading means as a result.